Humboldt County Association of Governments Board meeting to order. And can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Mayor Jones,
Here.
Supervisor Madrone, Mayor Burgell,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Councilmember Tuttle, Councilmember Orr, Pack Member Arroyo,
Here.
Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And we have no presentations today. And at this time, we'll take public comment on non-agenda items.
Recording in progress.
And I can do that. So at this time, we will see if there's any public comment on non-agenda items. And seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. We have one item, and it's approval of the meeting record.
I so move. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment for the consent calendar? I don't see any. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So that motion passes. And we,
Should we adjourn the HCOG board? Should that have happened before the consent?
yes, it should have.
We can do it now, I suppose.
Well, and at this time, we'll adjourn as the HCOG board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee and move to action items. And we have the 2023-2028 5-year Humboldt County Transit Development Plan.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn this presentation over to our consultant who prepared the plan. For their presentation, they're going to go through pretty much start to finish how this worked out. We have had a lot of public involvement in the formation of this plan. So I think that, and also a lot of involvement by the transit operators. So I think that we've got a good plan that's reflective of the comments we received. And with that, I'll let LSC take it away and we can ask questions at the end of their presentation. Gordon, you're still on mute.
There we go. How about now? You hear me all right?
You're pretty quiet.
We'll see what we can do on our end to see if we can get you a little louder. Hang on.
Okay. Well, I can yell like the best of them, but I will. If this works, okay.
Just give us a sec. It's still pretty quiet. I think it's audio on our end. 1 second, please.
Test, test, test.
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Ah, okay. Should I be whispering now? All right. With that, I'll just introduce myself, and then Claire can introduce herself. My name is Gordon Shaw. I'm a transportation engineer and planner, and have worked on transit plans now for 42 years, including probably about the last 12 or 15 years working on plans in Humboldt County, a wide variety of plans over the years. And we specialize in working on transit plans for more rural areas and smaller communities rather than big cities. And I think that gives us very good background for this plan. Claire Hutchinson has been very instrumental in working on this plan. I'll let her say hi.
Hi everyone. I'm a transportation planner with LSC. I've been here for about 2 years, so this is one of actually my first bigger projects I've seen start to finish. It's been really fun to work on, and I think the final plan is detailed and covers so much ground and so much of what Humboldt is looking for. So excited for the presentation.
Okay. With that, I do have a PowerPoint presentation to work through. It's kind of high level because there's a lot of detail here. I will say that of all the areas that I've worked on, this is the most kind of comprehensive transit plan that we have done. And it really reflects how comprehensive the transit network is in Humboldt County and the number of different providers that we have to think our way through. And different considerations. So this is a lot in here. As Beth mentioned, this process started with a lot of review of existing services and trends and so on, some of which have been kind of challenging over the last few years. It's getting better lately. And there's a lot of detail in the final document, the draft final document, to look at. And then we've worked our way through a lot of review of the community and the demographics of the area. We've looked at previous plans. We've spent a lot of time talking to people like Cal Poly Humboldt on what their plans are in the various cities in the county on their plans. And then a real deep dive into the existing services and what makes them tick and how they operate and how their finances work. And we've worked together. We've developed a comprehensive 5-year plan here. I'm going to dive into a PowerPoint here, which I assume will show up if I do this. How are we doing? On the screen?
Yep, we got it.
Yes. Great. Okay. One of the most important words on this screen is draft. This is still a draft document. It has been vetted by your staff. It's been vetted by the transit agencies and the city and the municipalities and so on. But this is a document that we hope you think you can take a look at. And if you see needs for some final modifications to that, that's why the word draft is on there. After today's discussion, we are hoping to make any final changes in your direction and turn it into a final plan that can guide services for the next 5 years. I have hit a little bit of this in my preface, but this is what we've been doing over the last year or so. And we've been working on reviewing existing conditions, a lot of detail on looking at potential solutions and alternatives. And then what we're really developing here is what I like to call a business plan, a 5-year plan that focuses on the dollars and the capacity of the staff and so on to actually get things done and get things implemented. So if you want to think about this as a document that really tells your Council of Governments, Association of Governments on where to put their focus and then where to spend their time and the dollars that go to the different transit agencies. And hopefully it's also a guide for the transit agencies as to how to develop their services in a comprehensive manner. That's a good way to think about this. As Beth mentioned, we've done a lot of public input through this process. We've done onboard surveys on all the different services. We've done an online community survey. We've done stakeholder interviews. We've had 2 very lively community workshops. I must say that you have a lot of people in the community that care and are interested in public transit and some of the benefits that can come from public transit. And that's been a help as we go through this. And then we also had a second online survey after we had alternatives to look at. So we feel like we've got a good understanding of what people are looking for. This chart here is a good kind of word cloud summary of what words we hear when we ask how you would describe your ideal transit system. And you can see frequent and reliable and safe and convenient. They all come up very often in the comments that we received. I will say too that we took this information and we took our review of the services and really tried to think through as we went through this, how can we expand the market, the types of people and the types of trips that people use to take public transit, so that we can get beyond kind of the traditional markets for transit and think about people who may have access to a car, or they'll choose transit because it makes their lives better. So you'll see that in our plan. We think of the process here as really starting from the service plan. Where are the buses going to go? Where are the vans going to go? When are they going to go? What's the service look like? From that really starts to drive what kind of vehicles do we need and what kind of facilities do we need. Together, that starts to drive how much money we need for the financial plans. And we also work into that, and we'll talk about marketing strategies to expand the markets, as I mentioned. So kind of leaping about 170 pages or so into this document, there is a plan chapter at the end that really tries to roll everything up. And if you have, you want to focus in on one part of the document that is really kind of the plan going forward, it's that final chapter, final two chapters in this case. But I'd like to just take a minute and kind of lay out the big picture of where we ended up. You can see the things that we are aiming for here of addressing the comments and input, improving the transit performance, taking advantage of near-term funding opportunities. I will say as an aside that one of the important functions of a transit development plan is that it's the document that funding agencies like the state will look at and say, okay, you've given us a grant application for X for this service improvement or this capital improvement. Is it in your transit plan? And it's kind of an issue if it's not in there, because they want to see that their dollars are being spent in a comprehensive and thought out way. So that's kind of a key function of our transit plan here. We tend to then think about, well, if you have a need for, if you think there's a good opportunity for a certain improvement, let's put it in the plan. And we've kind of leaned in that direction to be kind of proactive on putting things in the plan. This is a 5-year plan though, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but it is kind of a short-term strategy. It basically takes the world kind of as it is and says, how can we make the world better in the short term? There are longer-term planning processes, like when a area does a long-range land use or community or transportation plan that can think about broader issues. But this really kind of focuses on how are we doing now and how can we do it better? And I mentioned the last one there about attracting new riders, thinking about what's keeping people in their car when they could be on transit. I want to now kind of go off in a little bit in the details here as a preface, because one of the things you'll see here in a lot of parts of the plan is microtransit. And the idea that is really becoming a very popular thing around the country and across the state of essentially providing a public service level type service that's similar to an Uber service where you use an app. You can see the smartphone there. Everybody's got one, it seems like these days, although you don't have to have one to use this service. But you can use that app and you download it, and you, within a moment or a few minutes, you can say, please pick me up at my home, or please pick me up at a nearby street corner. And it will automatically use advanced technologies to dispatch the van and then tell you that your van will be there in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And you can watch it in real time as it gets closer. It'll be 15, it'll be 10, it'll be 5, and you can look down the street and here comes your van. This is a good way to serve lower density areas or lower demand times where a fixed route doesn't make too much sense, and is something that has been successfully implemented in a lot of other transit systems. I mentioned a few there. Napa, Truckee, Reno, Sacramento has got 8 different zones now. There's new services in Vacaville. There are new services that are being implemented in over in Butte County. So it's a tool, and you'll see it in a variety of different areas. So I want to go back here, now that I've mentioned that, to this map on the right. And this is kind of a map overview of the transit plan, the service plan. And you can see a number of different elements. First of all, I mentioned microtransit, and we've got 4 zones, and then could expand into a 5th zone over on the peninsula over time along the 101 corridor. And you can, I liken this to kind of a string of pearls plan. So we've got the string, which is the RTS service from Fortuna up to McKinleyville, and we've got the pearls, which are the improvements in the local services that include microtransit as well as some other things that we're going to mention here. You can see some other key things here. Just to the overall plan here, we've got in the plan express service, so very limited stop service from Arcata down to Eureka. It could start at some point up in McKinleyville to Arcata to Eureka and down to a College of the Siskiyous. That could be connecting to a series of park and rides that can start to get people out of their cars in a fast ride into places like the hospitals, or the county and Caltrans offices, or to Cal Poly. We've got a new route in Arcata that we're calling the Green Route. A bit of a modification on the new bus that's been put in there. We've got Earth Center improvements. We've got mobility hub improvements in Arcata. We've got a mobility hub in McKinleyville. And we also have some other key elements that we'll mention, including Sunday service. And you already know about the RCX service down to Ukiah. And we'll hit some of these other ones as we go through the rest of the presentation here. So diving into the details on the RTS service, we see this as an important element to do that step of getting people out of their cars that are currently looking at the schedule and say, it takes me an extra half hour to get to work if I take the bus because of all the stops and so on. So this is kind of a important, and it's really kind of our key strategy for getting people out of their cars on longer commutes. We can start with 3 round trips in the morning and 6 round trips in the afternoon with 1 vehicle. We can expand that between Cal Poly and Eureka. We can expand that over time to be a longer corridor and put 2 buses out there. It really has 2 benefits. It reduces the travel time, and then it puts a lot more buses between the activity centers over the course of those peak periods. So there's a lot shorter wait between buses. You can see the kind of ridership increase we think we'll get out of that, based upon some very detailed analysis. One caveat on this is that it would be an RTS service, but it would require a separate funding arrangement from the current RTS factors of 50% county and then 50% split by community based on population, because there's really no need for the services south of the College of the Redwoods to provide this service. I think I said, yeah. Um, as a secondary improvement, we heard a lot of desire for Sunday service, and we've got some strategies in for doing that. We think that that is probably more like a few years out, and it's going to take some additional funding than what we have now. That's going to take some grant requests. It also would be much more effective if it was more than just RTS, so that you could get to RTS, say in Eureka, from the neighborhoods, rather than just have to get yourself to the RTS stops and in Fortuna and so on, or in Arcata. So it's got, you can see the ridership potential on that is relatively low when we look at it compared with other area with other options based upon Sunday ridership in other areas. But I would say that it is an important thing for more people to start to think about, I don't need that car, or I don't need the second car, or I'm a college student and I don't need to bring a car because there's a 7-day-a-week transit service. So it is a good step towards moving towards, a real kind of transit lifestyle. More details on microtransit. Here is a map of the zone that we could be providing microtransit service in. One of the kind of key strategies here, you see implement incrementally. And there's kind of two different ways that microtransit has been rolled out in other areas. There's the expensive way, which actually is where I live in the Tahoe area, where you go out and you buy a lot of vans and you start a big service at once and you really market it. And it can be effective, but it's also very expensive to start that way. Town of Truckee, California, which is only about 18,000 people, they're spending about $1.8 million just on their microtransit service. So that's the expensive way to go. The other way to go, and what we're suggesting here, is to start with the dial-a-ride service and to kind of incrementally improve that and open it to the public, and don't do a big rollout and get a lot of demand on day one, but to expand it slowly and let it kind of grow organically into a service and see where that balance is. There is a danger on microtransit that you can get demand that you can't meet. So we're being cautious on that. But you can see it's a substantial ridership there, and it ties in with the McKinleyville mobility plan and the idea of a transit hub there. Same sort of thing in Eureka, gradually implement it, more ridership there. So that's something that we think could be started slowly, and once it's up and running, then we'll take a look at some of that service could go over the bridge and over to the peninsula, and it may be the best way to serve Samoa and Manila and the peninsula area. Sunday transit service, we've got a strategy here for basically running 2 buses on Sunday service and implementing that. Again, probably not too much ridership generated on Sunday service, but it's a good step. The other caveat on Sunday service is that you need to hire more than just the drivers. You also need to have the staff to staff if there's any breakdowns. So you need a mechanic, and if you have one mechanic, safety requirements say you need 2 mechanics, and you need a dispatcher. So it's kind of a more expensive thing than just let's put a bus out on Sunday and see how it does. While I'm talking about Eureka Transit System as part of the HTA services, we looked at some different options for routing and redesigning the system. Overall, the transit routes, which can look complicated, they do a good job of covering the community with 4 buses, which is it's a challenging thing to do, and providing pretty good transit coverage and travel times for most trips. One of the things that we've done is we've got some ideas on rescheduling the services so that it really ties in with the Third and H transfer hub, and when it converts over to Earth Center. And so that it really starts to serve more as a feeder system into the RTS main line. So we think we can, for essentially no cost, we can retweak the schedules and get some more ridership out of that. Some other HTA plan elements. We looked at Southern Humboldt Intercity and didn't see any need for changes to that service. There may be some need as the service to Eureka or to Ukiah grows to look at how that can be coordinated better with that service. One of the only real reduction that we're recommending in this service in services is we looked at the Willow Creek service, and on Saturday it really is very low ridership for the costs that we're spending out there. I'm a good transit advocate, but when you start to see numbers like $120 or $130 of subsidy needed to move one passenger, you have to say that that's not a good use of taxpayer dollars. It's doing much better on weekdays, so we didn't change anything there. But we can save quite a lot of money on by focusing on weekdays rather than on Saturday. We've got some suggestions in here about dial-a-ride and how to make it more efficient. Right now, there's a pretty good number or percentage of trip requests that end up being a no-show. So the van goes out there and they're not there. And it's about 8%, which is a relatively high number. And about 20% of people make a reservation and then will cancel at the last minute. And we've already started the van service. And again, that makes things more expensive for everybody. So that's a matter of kind of more definition on the policies and more consistent application of them. The last one there too is kind of digging into the weeds a little bit, but there's an existing funding agreement for dial-a-ride services that is based upon the number of ADA registered people and then the number of rides, but it's not based upon the cost of providing service to different areas. And it's about 2 or 3 times more expensive for the dial-a-ride service to serve somebody in McKinleyville or way down south in the dial-a-ride area as it is in Eureka. And so we've got recommendations in there about how to put the cost of service, the number of minutes and associated costs of that service into the funding agreement so that it's a bit more equitable. And it really does kind of rattle through to the rest of the system, because right now Eureka in particular they're spending all their transit dollars on transit. They're not spending any of it on streets and roads. And because they're spending so much on the dial-a-ride, they can't do other things. They can't do other improvements. So this is where we could free up some money there. It would take some other funding from other entities, but that would allow the overall system to be more expanded. All right, this gets easier and faster as I go through it. The MRTS service, the Arcata service, we looked at a lot of different alternatives for Arcata. Basically, they're doing an incredible job with 2 buses, and we just started a 3rd bus that kind of does a north loop. But we've ended up developing a route here. This would be operated, we're calling it the green route, and it would be operated with 1 bus. And instead of being focused on the transit center downtown, it would really be focused on Library Circle at Cal Poly Humboldt. And it would, every hour, it could do a loop. This actually expands south of Arcata Boulevard or Samoa Boulevard and serves some new neighborhoods down here, which has been a long-term desire. So there's about a 15-minute loop, comes back to Library Circle and then does a loop in the center here. There's actually quite a lot of transit ridership along Alliance Road. So it does a loop in the clockwise direction, comes back, then it does a big clockwise loop on the north end. And what that does is it gives us a direct route, direct run every hour from the Craftsman Mall area into Cal Poly, back out again, as well as good service for the north end of town getting to and from Cal Poly. This would only be when college is in session, but it could generate quite a lot of ridership. And basically now it's a redesign of the current third bus route. We also looked at a lot of different options for expanding the hours of service. And the one that made sense to us was starting the orange route, the one bus kind of comprehensive loop 1 hour earlier, so that people can get to where they're going by 7 or 7:30 rather than have to wait for a bus that might not show up at their stop until 7:30. And we could get some good ridership out of that. And then we also have discussion about Sunday service for Arcata. Also, microtransit service, again, making it available to the public and gradually implement it. Kind of cast a wide net here of including some of the outlying employee sites. Again, this is something that would be attractive to people that are not close to a bus route, or the bus route is kind of longer distance or longer travel times. It goes down to Sunny Brae and Bayside, so it does pick up some of that request for service in Bayside that we've heard for many years. So that's another element. Going south to Fortuna, microtransit service, basically it's city limits. And one of the benefits of this down in Fortuna is that could allow the RTS service to not have to go kind of east of Fortuna Boulevard, at least when the microtransit service is going. It might still go late in the evening and so on. But it allows us to streamline that. It saves some dollars on the transit side, on the fixed route transit side. It speeds the travel times. So there's some good strategy there to improve both services. We think it would get a good amount of ridership increase. It does have a cost impact. It would be more costly to put this service on over time, but it could be a benefit. Okay, that was the service plan. It does get easier too as we get into the details here on the capital plan. You've seen a lot of these plans in the past. The Earth Center, don't have to tell you about that. There's always going to be a need for a transit connection near F and Harris, and right now the Joann's, I joke that is probably the best transit served Joann's store in the country. It's got all these buses sitting out front sometimes, but it's not a very attractive place. It doesn't have very good amenities, so there's potential there. Willow Creek is an important connection with Trinity Transit, and a modest mobility hub there, some better shelters, and park and ride is something that in particular Caltrans has been looking at or would like to look at. A transit hub in McKinleyville, I mentioned that. And I don't have to tell you about the substantial plans for the operations center improvements that are very much needed. More capital plan elements. The Arcata Transit Center is starting to show its age and is not particularly attractive. And I think there are people that are concerned that it doesn't feel safe. There are some things that can be done kind of site-wise, site improvements to freshen it up and make it a little bit more safe for the riding public. But it's always going to be in kind of an inconvenient location. The city of Arcata in particular would like to see a study on looking at different options for those different locations, perhaps taking that current location and making it more affordable housing there and moving that use somewhere out closer to 101. There's a lot of discussion in here about microtransit technology to make all this microtransit work and to make all the apps work in the dispatch service. And that's something that HTA and Greg have been working hard to implement. We have discussion in here about park and ride options that really tie in with the express service. And there's one there's a long discussion in here. You either want to be really close to the activity center, which like the southwest corner of US 101 and Sunset Avenue. So you're almost within a walking distance of campus there. That's one option. Or you want to be kind of further away so that people have enough benefit in terms of travel time to offset the inconvenience of transferring to the bus. And in looking around, one of the things that we've done in other areas is not, rather than building big new parking lots, is to see where we can make better use of existing parking lots. And this would take some more work and more study, but there's a lot on the north side of Bayshore Mall that it seems is almost never used, if ever is filled. There's the opportunity during the weekday at the Bear River Casino to make an agreement for shared use parking there. It's not far off of 101. We'd be interested as to whether the large parking lots at College of the Redwoods are really fully needed, given current enrollment, maybe a shared parking agreement there. And then the big old Fortuna Mill site, and whether there's a potential to do modest improvements to that. It seems like something to look at too. Bus stops are important throughout the system. There's a variety of good and bad and unattractive bus stops. So an access improvement plan that could look at the safety and convenience of bus stops, we suggest that happens. The transit staffs have done a good job on getting everyone lined up for zero emission bus technology and getting funding for that. So we're essentially just folding that into our plan here. I don't think I need to say too much about that, other than it takes a lot of money. And I think this is the impact of what our plan will need for expanding services. Not too much, but there is particularly a need for additional vans for microtransit, and then 2 fixed route buses for express service. Marketing, there's a lot of discussion in here also about marketing and how we can expand the public's perception and awareness of public transit. One of the things that we really kind of rely on is the idea of developing a regional brand for all the services, and making that consistent. There's confusion among all the different systems and how they tie together. We've got a better system than people realize, because they tend to think of it as individual services that are not tied together. And as we implement this plan, we'll be better tied together. So we've got some kind of very specific things in here about website improvements and writers' guides, and so on, events to particularly increase awareness on the university and college campuses. I'm getting close to the end here. I'm running out of steam. The institutional plan, this is where we kind of think bigger picture about how everything fits together. There is some discussion in here about updating and applying some performance standards, some numerical numbers of things like passengers per vehicle hour and so on, so that we can kind of rationally figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. Institutionally, one of the things that's coming up is the Yurok tribe is doing their own separate transit plan, which is why they're not particularly included here, other than by reference. But as they do that plan, let's coordinate those plans. We are always a big proponents for encouraging transit-oriented land use planning, and some of this is already it's happening. Things like the Earth Center and so on. Let's get more people in the future living closer to transit hubs, and that makes their potential to use it all that much greater. Last thing on this screen that we didn't put in the plan, but we encourage you to look at as perhaps a next step, is the potential of doing away with transit fares, perhaps for some people, perhaps for all people, all riders. There's a great start with the university free pass program, but there's lots of evidence these days that getting rid of even a modest fare, a $1.70 fare or something, can generate about a 30 or 40% increase in transit ridership, essentially for very little net cost, in the big picture of things, we've got buses that are emptier than they were 5 years ago because of pandemic and changes. Now we could fill them back up without adding new buses by making it a free system. It does take additional outside funding, but many transit systems find that that's a cheaper way to get more people on the bus than putting more buses out on the road. Some more kind of in the weeds institutional things. There's a big change in the availability of federal transit funding if you're an urbanized area. And an urbanized area is defined by the Department of Census based on population and population density and continuity of population density. And it's a very complicated thing. You have to have over 50,000 people, which we do. We have to have it in a continuous area without any gaps of lower density areas, including water. So that's a challenge, like including Arcata and Eureka into one urbanized area. But looking at it, it seems awfully close that we could be designated, or there could be a Eureka urbanized area, and that allows us to generate urban transit funds. That's what funds all the big transit systems in big urban areas. And that would be worth a kind of a specialized study by an expert in that field. As I mentioned, this is a short range plan, and there is a need for a long range transit plan, particularly when we get into evaluating the benefits of land use changes as it affects transit and starts to support transit service. That's where a long range, like a 20-year plan, really comes into place. There's also a planning process called a comprehensive operational assessment, which dives into even further detail on the routing strategies and the service strategies. It also these days is a COA, as they're known, can really dive into looking at cell phone-based data, what's called big data, and comparing actual travel patterns with where the bus service goes, and making sure that we're doing as much as we can to match where people are really going. And then the last one at the bottom there is a item for a institutional structure study. I think in the big picture, what has happened is the area has grown, the needs have grown. We've got more growth in certain areas, particularly McKinleyville, Arcata, parts of Eureka, than we do down in South County. And so looking at how whether there is a need for combining systems in a more formal way. We're doing a lot of this on the ground, but doing that on an institutional basis, so that perhaps more of the funding that say comes through HCOG gets allocated directly to transit in the future. That's the sort of thing that a institutional structure study can look at. I think right now we're seeing that it's starting to get in the way of being able to implement improvements. The current, very long-standing, decades-old current institutional structure. So, quick summary here of what does this plan do. And I always hold my breath when I get to this slide, or I get to this part of the study, because we want the ridership increase to be more than the cost increase, at least on a percentage basis. So you can see here kind of the big picture. HTA service as a whole, including ETS and everything, about 700,000 more annual passenger trips. That's almost a doubling of transit ridership when fully implemented, but it's about a 24% increase in operating costs. So we're making the system more efficient by increasing ridership more than we're increasing costs. For ANMRTS, about over a doubling of ridership with that third bus, and with microtransit, and with a slight expansion of hours. It is a pretty substantial increase in operating costs. It's a 72% increase in 1.1 million there. So again, that is going to take some new funding strategies, but it is making it more efficient. For Tuna Transit, we do have a substantial percent increase in ridership. it's a more challenging place to get the next person on the bus because we're putting it in a microtransit and it's lower efficiency. So we do have costs going up higher than a ridership there. One kind of an aside here, but it certainly was an aside as we did the study. Part of this plan was looking at Cal Poly Humboldt and how can we support that and what makes sense in terms of the plan elements that really start to move the needle, as they say, change how people are getting to and from the campus. So what you see here is the elements that we've pulled out and said, these are the things that really start to benefit Cal Poly. And it's the express service, it's the new service, the new green route service, it's the microtransit and the service improvements in the other communities that feed into the express service and the park and rides. I would encourage someone to take this chart here and go march up the hill to Cal Poly and say, look at these benefits you're getting. We're hoping you can be a funding partner as we start to do these things. So I am basically have worked my way through the whole thing here, and I'm happy to take any questions. But Beth, do you have anything to add as I wrap up?
I just thank you. That was great. I feel like we just relived like almost 2 years of our lives there. That was it's been a process, and we're just so grateful for their effort because, as you can tell, they were really thorough, and we did get a lot of public comments. We got a lot of comments from the operators, and we were able to I will say the consultants, LSC, Gordon and Claire, were so accommodating as those things came in and kind of looking at it new. And I think it's mentioned in the staff report that Cal Poly Humboldt did contribute financially to this study so that they could be more integrated. So that was a little bit of a late addition, though. So they were also the LSC team was very flexible with us to be able to really kind of get that information after we already started, but be able to incorporate it really thoroughly. So so yeah, just grateful for Gordon for his presentation and for the whole effort over this last time that we've been working on it. And then in terms of the action today, so there's a couple different options. First, please ask all the questions. That was a lot of information we just heard. So please, we want to dialogue with Gordon here a little more. But then the option to either adopt this document as is, or to, seek some clarification, request some changes, and we can bring it back for adoption at a later date. So those options are both available. It's, we want to get this thing adopted, but there's not like a hard and fast deadline for it. So we also want to make sure it's reflective of what the board wants to see. So just kind of that procedural, and then I turn it back over for questions.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Gordon and Claire, for your work on there. And we'll see if we have any questions here from the board. Mayor Jones.
Yeah. Hi, Gordon. Thank you. I'm the mayor of a small town about 6 miles east on 299. And I was actually going to mention tonight during my director report to thank Humboldt Transit Authority, but something happened in Blue Lake that was rather sudden. We were giving our transit funds, allocating them to the Blue Lake Rancheria, which is a rancheria adjacent to our little town. They were taking that $34,000 a year and operating a transit system. They gave the city of Blue Lake about 2 weeks notice that they were going to discontinue their service as of October 7th. So it was very difficult for our small staff, but they pulled together with Humboldt Transit Authority and got some transit out to our city very quickly. And I want to thank Humboldt Transit Authority for that, by the way. We serve about 20 students that are coming to Arcata High from east of Blue Lake that are not in the system to be able to take the school bus because they were technically out of the district of Arcata High. But anyway, I would like to see some sort of inclusion of Blue Lake in this plan if it's possible and appropriate, because we are in need of continued service out there in Blue Lake, and we have made an agreement. It's tentative at this point, but I think we would love to see it more definite and more permanent. So anyway, just a little information for you, and then just not a question actually, but just something I'd like to see possibly in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. This was really good, and I'm really excited that we're seeing reflected in here a lot of the things that that our board have heard and are working towards, and that's certainly by design. So I appreciate that. And I did have a question. It was a little unclear to me. I truly may have just missed it, but whether the higher priority as far as increasing ridership and efficiency of operations was to put on that express service or the earlier and later weekday service. Because right now my understanding is our board is focusing on really meeting that priority of the earlier and later weekday service. So are they sort of ranked as far as their these different options as far as their effectiveness?
Yes, our analysis indicates that the express service is a more efficient way to spend, the next set of dollars, rather than expanding hours of service. You really you've got a good span of service now, other than Sunday, but the ridership there is less like per hour of service. We really see that express service as being, we can start with just one bus and really start to have something that we can sell to serve both existing passengers as well as start to build some new market. So there's a lot of details in the appendices in particular, but in terms of overall efficiency, we'd say to focus on the RTS side on the express service first.
Thank you. That's great to know. Chair Johnson, may I ask a couple more? I have them written down, so they should be succinct. All right. With Fortuna, that's one of the systems where Fortuna has their own vehicles, currently operates as a senior service only. And so I see the recommendations in here to expand that into more of a dial-a-ride or not like a microtransit system from its existing iteration. Do you think there are any efficiencies to be gained by consolidating operations of that? I think that the whether or not we want to do that is a different question, but I'm just curious about whether there are improvements that could be made by having common dispatching. I saw the recommendation in here about how using the same software.
Right. We didn't specifically look at the question of, say, whether the Fortuna system should be operated by HTA. That might be part of that institutional study. So I will admit that that's not something that we have specifically looked at. We did spend a lot of time looking at how changing the RTS or implementing microtransit allows the RTS buses to stay kind of just on the main streets and not go off to the east there and serve the hospital and places like that. But that's a valid question about whether turning those funds directly over to HTA. I think that's what you're asking about, and then having that operated as a whole. I would be hazarding a guess if I were to guess right now.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to clarify over at HTA, we're not trying to do a big power grab for everybody's systems, but I know the experience with Eureka was that it was a pretty good increase in efficiency and saved staff a lot of time and energy. So there were some good things about it, but those conversations can always be had. And then my last question, and this actually really, this topic was resurrected at a First Five meeting today. One of the conversation topics that came up was around people wanting to provide transit passes that are not just a month pass or a day pass for clients, and have like reloadable, refillable cards of some kind. We do currently have the tap on, tap off to pay, but people have to be banked or buy a something that has a chip. So a refillable bank card could be used. However, and this is a very niche question, but for people that are, say, providing social services, they may not want to give their clients a bank card that can be used for anything. They want it specifically to be used for transportation. And at our recent transit conference, it looked like there were some options that other systems had been using, but I don't really know more about what that is. Do you have recommendations around that you've seen in all your experience with other transit agencies?
Yeah, yes, there are cards that, big chip-enabled cards that are only valid for tapping on and tapping off on bus services in larger urban areas. And I know that HTA staff has been working diligently to implement that, and kind of been a leader in that we've seen in the region. And it's got some real advantages. One of the things that it allows a transit agency to do is to cap the total fare that people have to pay, say within a week or within a month. And if you're a regular user and you've used up you're now tapping more than $40 worth of boardings, it'll cap you there and just say you've got the rest of the month for free. So it tends to benefit those who use the system most. So it is certainly financially possible to do that, physically possible.
I just wanted to say that was brought up at our meeting last night, is that some people their bank cards don't have chips as well. And so I think that is a good possible idea.
Yep.
And
I see a few hands raised.
yeah, I was getting to that. Mayor Burgell.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Very thorough. The thing that kind of stuck out with me was this whole business of, out of all of that, free fare options to increase ridership. I know other cities do that. And I'm wondering, is that something, maybe this is a question for Beth, is this something that we're going to be looking into? We had someone at council on Tuesday night who I think she took a microtransit. Anyway, it was $18 for her to go to Arcata. And she's an elderly woman who doesn't have a lot of money. It might have been dial-a-ride. But the point being is that that can be really expensive for our senior citizens. $18 to go to Arcata, that seemed to me a bit outrageous. So I would like to see us leaning more towards no fees. I know Portland does that, and it seems to work out really well. I think they do that. Maybe they just do that on the train. I'm not sure. I'd have to look further, but I just feel like that could really be an option for people to get around easier.
Yeah, I will say that there's, I think, been some free fare promotions over the years, sort of like limited duration time to kind of incentivize ridership. I think at the moment, and maybe Natalie, PAC member Arroyo can share more, but really, my understanding what we're focusing on at the moment is really fare capping, and dial-a-ride's kind of a different story with the zones, and we need to do some work on that in general with some of the efficiency and the way the costs are shared. But when it comes to fare capping, there's I think we're at $2 for 2 hours or something, and that's with the tap on tap off, which is so great because and is it $7 or $8 per day that we'll max out. So anyway, basically there'll be, if you use the same card and you get on and off the bus with it, it knows when you've spent your max for that day, and it won't keep charging you. Everything else is essentially a free ride, so you're never going to be in this situation where you spent $32 on the bus rides today. But I'm sorry, I don't know all the exact amounts right off the top of my head, but yeah, I think that's definitely something that HTA is working towards, is that fare capping and making sure that it's very cost effective, and certainly a lot of discussions around free fares and the value of that I think is well understood. There's a little bit of some legal background on that there's always been that fare box recovery ratio. Sometimes we hear about that. Would it meet the fare box, and you had to actually show that you were earning 10% of the cost from fares, so it wasn't overly subsidized. That's been put on hold after after COVID, and there's a chance it may not come back at all. So that will be a little bit liberating if we can get rid of that. And then I think, free fares really become a better option.
Great. Thank you.
Since you mentioned me, can I add on?
Yes, please.
So I think the free fares is something that we could certainly keep exploring. We're not really, we'd have to make some shifts over time to how we finance all of our operations, because that's not how we're currently set up. So it'd be a major structural shift, but definitely worth exploring. And, we certainly want to increase ridership very much. With respect to the dial-a-ride system, so we are... it may have been that the person who participated was a traditional dial-a-ride user, and so people were either age qualified or disability qualified to use the system. But now we're opening that up, and it's a bit of a soft launch to expand that to serve as a microtransit function. The reason it's not really being heavily promoted right now is that we are working out the dispatching and timing kinks. But the idea is that people can use an app, and similar to hailing an Uber, Lyft, or whatever ride sharing vehicles or a cab, they could, instead of getting that door-to-door service, so traditional dial-a-ride service is door-to-door in part because it exists for people who can't use fixed route transit. But we're realizing that those vehicles are running extremely inefficiently. They're often empty, often rides get canceled, as Gordon mentioned. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and that system is currently operated by CAE Transport under contract with us. So we don't own the vehicles. So those are HTA operated and dispatched, or dispatched, I should say, but they're operated and maintained by CAE under contract. So it's it's an asset that we have as a community. And, we have these 5 or 6 vehicles running around at any given time, and a lot of times they're empty. So the goal was to really fill those seats but we can't, for a variety of reasons, we're not allowed to really compete with those other service providers. So we need to be giving people a ride from one transit stop to another. Those don't necessarily have to be on the same route. So they could go from like a transit stop in Eureka over by the zoo, say, to, one near Mad River Hospital, and then, go back to a different transit stop and use a fixed route, ride. And so people could cobble together a ride amongst those options. But the dial-a-ride is currently more expensive because it's dispatching a vehicle that's currently, out ready to be used, but for that specific ride, rather than the efficiencies of that fixed route service. So I hope that helps a bit. And we are really aiming to use that to fill some gaps. They can go a little further. They can go to places where there's not fixed route service, like the Samoa Peninsula, south of the bridge. The town of Samoa is going to have that option. So we're excited about it, and we'll see how it works, and it's still less efficient. And so, as Gordon mentioned, we really need to look at the structure of the fares and just figure out answer some big questions about how we use resources to get people around. I mean, we certainly want people to be able to, who can't get from place to place any other way, to be able to get to the doctor and stuff like that. And there's also, there's senior resource center vehicles. There's all these different programs and processes that people can engage in to get around. And so I think it's a bigger conversation, and it's a huge set of challenges. But right now, people should be able to take those vehicles a little later and a little earlier than when we currently have service, and to different destinations, and kind of on demand, as long as those vehicles are available and they're able to use the app. So that was probably more information than you wanted, but you know me.
Very thorough, yes. So I'm curious then, will dial-a-ride people still have the priority?
Yes.
Okay.
They will have priority, and those rides can be scheduled in advance, and they will be door-to-door service. But those are the most expensive alternative.
Gotcha.
But there's still, I did a little checking, and it sort of depends different times of day. Like I kind of pulled up my Uber and Lyft app, and I didn't hail a ride, but I looked to see how much it would be if I were to hail it. And then compared that to what our zone map is. And it's a little less to use this service. So we're hoping that will incentivize people using it. They do have to go from a stop to a stop. So it'll help them figure out like what stop's closest and you know, and then tell them how soon their ride will be there.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions? I got a couple, but
Okay, it looks like Supervisor Madrone has joined us online and he's got his hand up.
okay, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to support what Mayor Jones was saying about Blue Lake, making sure it's in the plan and that they, you know, can be able to get service and stuff. I also appreciate HTA responding so quickly to the cancellation of that service by adding that as a stop for the Willow Creek run. But, you know, there's a lot of danger there in adding something like that to what is an express route for students and parents that are already getting up at probably 6 in the morning to get to the bus in time to get to school in time. And it may not seem like a big deal to pull off into Blue Lake, but it probably adds about 15 minutes to the route. And then there's talk that there's also a stop at Valley West on demand for that same express route. And when you start doing that, you start losing ridership. And so I hope that's just a short-term fix and that we can work with Blue Lake to provide long-term systems and keep the Willow Creek express route express. So thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Latanya's up there.
Thank you. I have several questions. I'll start with Fortuna.
Tanya, could you please, we're going to get through the board questions and then we'll open it up for public comment. Sorry about that.
Okay, so my question is for Gordon, and it pertains to table 41 in the plan. It's Fortuna Transit Service Alternative Summary. And I just wanted to make sure that I was reading it right and understood, because our person that was working with you guys to develop this is no longer at the city of Fortuna, and we're playing catch up.
Okay.
And on there, it talks about the maintaining the status quo, and the operating costs is $218,112, and ridership with fare revenues leaving it says a operating subsidy, which I'm assuming is the operating cost of $202,000. Is that right? Am I reading it?
Well, that's the operating, the public dollars in addition to the fare revenues that is needed.
Right.
Is the 202,000.
Yes.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's after the fares, that's the cost to the agency, whether it be Humboldt Transit or the city of Fortuna. So,
Yeah, that's what it takes.
okay. And then down there underneath that, it says service alternatives, a change with implementing microtransit, and it's $194,000 for the operating cost with an assumed ridership of 4,100 and deducting it's 181,900. But is that also encompassed in that? Does that encompass the people that were formerly in the dial-a-ride, or is this in addition to the dial-a-ride?
This is expanding the dial-a-ride. It's going to take more vehicles, one more vehicle over a certain number of hours per day to provide enough capacity. One of the challenges on microtransit is that if you've got 5 people who call you up or use the app and they are all over town, it's about as many people in an hour as you can serve. It's about 5 people per hour in a community that's about the size of Fortuna. So we do need to add some additional, like a second van some hours, a third van some hours, so that we can accommodate the general public on top of the dial-a-ride. So it's all one service. And as was mentioned, the people with disabilities would always be number one in terms of accommodating their ride. But then we would be adding some hours to serve other people too, and that's where this additional dollars and additional hours of service come from.
That's kind of what I figured, but I wanted to clarify that before I made a hard stand. Because that's a significant addition in revenue that we'd have to scrape together from someplace. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
That's
Just,
true.
I think it's comes to about $43 a ride. So, for the additional 4,100 people.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much my question, getting that clarified. I appreciate what you put together in there and all the work that you've put into it. And for someone, a bigger agency with better revenue, they probably have a better chance of making some of those decisions and getting it done. So is there any other board questions? If not, we'll open public comment.
Yeah, if I could I lead us in a little public comment, if I may? I think a good protocol would be if we have any public comment in the room first, and then public comment on Zoom. And I would suggest that after we hear all the public comment, that if your board could direct our consultant as to what to respond to, if anything, just so we're not in a freestyle dialogue. But just kind of those are my public comment.
Well, is there any public comment from the audience? And seeing none, we'll move to the online public comment. I think our first hand is for LaTanya.
Okay, now is not the time to speak?
Yes.
Okay. There was a lot of material covered, a lot of ground covered, and I'm just gonna try to go back. I'll start with Fortuna. Did I understand correctly that there's a mini transit in Fortuna, which is the Dallaride? And are they looking to eliminate runs from the RTA or RTS? I'm sorry. To the mini transit? It meaning that if you live in Eureka and you need to go to the Fortuna Clinic, the HTA or the RTS will not be taking you to that place. You would have to rely on the RTS to get you to the main route, and then catching a mini transit from the main route to the Fortuna Clinic. Is that what you're saying?
We'll write that down and follow up. If you have another question after that.
Yeah, I have several questions. It's quite a few questions, but I know other people have to speak. So, but I wanted to get clarification on that. And also about the Sunday service. Am I to understand that you're not going to pursue Sunday service other than what's in Arcata, meaning the RTS from, I don't know, Trinidad, California, to the other end of the route for the RTS? You're not opening that up, because it looks like it's limited service on Sunday, if it is service on Sunday.
If I could jump in. So LaTanya, I'd be happy to meet with you offline and go over the details in the plan, and then reserve this time for public comment. So if you have any comments, and then we can get your questions answered on the side. What we're doing, what this plan does is make essentially a series of recommendations. There's no changes in transit service that are happening immediately as a result of this plan. So it's just the recommendations moving forward, and there'll be more decisions to come in terms of which ones are going to get implemented at which times. So I'm happy to talk through that with you offline, but reserve this time for comments rather than questions.
Okay.
Okay, is that okay. Well, is there anything other follow-up that we'd like to make with our consultants? Okay. Do we have a direction, a motion? Or would you want to table it until, for follow-up at a later time?
Well, I was just wondering with the concerns for Blue Lake, like, should we table that and come back to it after Blue Lake's been considered, or I'm not sure of the process, so I'm asking.
Yeah, we can, we can look at a slight amendment. They've wrapped up their work and we have, but we can, it's kind of a new question because we wrapped this up. You see the dates, right? September 27th is when and then we had such short notice. So it is interesting that, it was kind of just really breaking news. So I think, we could make that ask and I could talk with them about it. And if the rest of it seems, reasonable, we don't have changes, we could just kind of come back with that revised language for Blue Lake and, we'll work with LSC to kind of come up with a timeline for how quickly they could analyze that. If that sounds good to Gordon as well, and bring that back at a later time and then, just kind of come back with the revised language regarding Blue Lake and then formal adoption at that time.
May I ask a question about that? Are you talking about the idea of Blue Lake joining the Joint Powers Authority that is Humboldt Transit Authority, or about adding additional analysis of service in Blue Lake? I wasn't sure. Because one of them would come to us for, consideration. We'd have to amend the JPA if because Blue Lake's not currently a member, but, that could be done. It's just a sort of a different question. Was it clear?
Yeah, I apologize for the haste of this information because it was for us also hasty. And I'm not sure formally how we should go about this. I mean, I know that it's a short-term agreement at this point. I would like to see it be long-term, but I don't know if the TAC needs to talk. Our city manager can talk during our technical advisory committee meeting to formalize this more, or, this is a draft at this point that's been brought before us. I'm fine with adopting the draft with the possibility of amending it at a further time if necessary.
And I think our ask would be to kind of look at all of what you just said. Is like, does it mean, if we're having a stop there and it's HTA having that stop, does that mean they should be part of the JPA? So just really kind of looking at that, kind of even that institutional structure was sort of on the list of things to study further, even without, a potential addition of another city. So I think there's a lot we could dive into with that, but not, still keeping it fairly contained, but be able to answer that. And, kind of there's also can it be accomplished with just, cost sharing for what it takes to get the HTA bus out there. So, maybe Gordon could share some thoughts, not necessarily right this second. I don't want to put him on the spot, or maybe he's happy to answer, but just looking at all of that, what is the most efficient option moving forward?
Right. And I don't want to hold up this process if we want to adopt this, even though it is a draft this evening, with the possibility of it becoming an amendment later on. I'm fine with that. I think it does need to be talked about in the technical advisory committee meeting. Perhaps further and more information can be garnered from that.
Okay,
Gordon, you're on mute.
Somebody did that to me. If I could make a suggestion, this happens all the time because of the process, and it takes a month or two to go from you've got a draft document to you're presenting to the board, and the world changes. The world moves at a rapid clip. What I would suggest is that we craft a paragraph that goes in the plan that says, that gives kind of a plan element to look at that there is a need for transit service. And some of the options are, we could look at what does it take for Willow Creek to divert, and does that really meet the needs for things like school trip times? Or there could be some other extension of HTA service. Those would be valid options. But it is going to take some discussion on the institutional and financial side too. I would say that given where we are, that's kind of outside of the scope of what we've been doing for the last year. But if we at least have a placeholder there, so that it's in the plan that this is something going forward that people will look at, and then that could be an amendment to this plan at a future date. And then you could adopt the draft plan with that caveat that that addition is going to be made.
We could draft something along the lines of adopt the 2023-2028 Transit Development Plan with the knowledge that there is a need for transit for the Blue Lake community. And yeah. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. The HCOG board adopt the 2023-2028 Transit Development Plan. I move that with an additional paragraph to be put in by staff concerning the needs of the city of Blue Lake.
I will second that.
And is this a voice vote or a?
Yeah,
Okay.
Do you want to ask for public?
Is there any public comment?
Oh, no.
Oh,
You make
no,
your
not
motion
public
and your
comment.
second. And then-
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to do.
and then vote.
Okay.
Motion made by Adeline Jones.
There's a motion made by Adeline Jones and second by Mayor, former council member Atkins Salazar.
Is there any further discussion
And
from
it-
council?
is any further discussion?
See.
All right, well, at this time, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now, after that adventure, we have no informational items, and at this time, we will, by motion, adjourn and reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the pack of recommendations.
Can we say so moved? So moved.
Second.
Second.
A motion.
Second.
Pardon?
You move to reconvene, and I have a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And at this time, we'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One more aye, no opposed. All right, so done. Now we'll come to staff and PAC member reports with the executive director's report.
All right, thanks. Well, I get to start off my report. First off, I think just a quick thank you to Claire and Gordon for being here. I want to make sure they know they can log off, or if they're really excited to hear this exciting news, they should stay on. So we were awarded the REAP 2.0 grant that we applied for at the end of last year. It took a very long time to get the information. So we received $2.7 million. The things we're supporting with these funds are the We Are Up Housing Development Project in McKinleyville, and also pertinent to what we were just discussing, McKinleyville microtransit system. So that was a package we had put together, and I'm sure most were here and remember, but the We Are Up project is about 50 units that's proposed in McKinleyville, just behind the grocery outlet off of Central, and it is going to be a housing complex for people with and without disabilities, and the first of its kind in our region, and first of its kind really, kind of statewide as well. So it's very, very exciting. And I just want to really thank, Humboldt Transit Authority for partnering with us in terms of the microtransit system, and the We Are Up nonprofit for partnering with us on that. They really are going to be the two agencies having to do the hard work and actually implementing the grant that we'll be just administering the funds for by and large. But then also special thanks to the HCOG team. This was a grant that was due on New Year's Eve, which was a Saturday. And I really just have to, especially Stevie Luther, we worked through, the Christmas holiday, putting it together, and then, that special deadline, which was one unlike I've seen before. So just really thankful that we, that your board gave us the direction to proceed with the grant. And it's a big win. And so we're so grateful to receive those funds. The next thing I want to mention is October 28th from noon to 6, we'll be having the housing exhibition. So this is next Saturday. It's at the Jefferson Community Center. With the original REAP funds we received, you'll remember we've been watching some videos here occasionally in terms of hiring artists to do different forms of art related to furthering the discussion around housing. So we'll have the videos playing. We have a comic book that was printed out, and we'll have those to distribute. There is an artist who will be making a sculpture regarding housing that will be on display that day, and I believe we'll have the still photographs as well that we commissioned. So it should be kind of a compilation of all the different artists' work that we've engaged with during this process, and we'll send out to the board the save the date for that. We're hoping to have, mainly it's an open house from noon to 6, but again at the Jefferson Community Center here in Eureka, but also hoping to kind of schedule a couple touch points along that open house for, maybe some speakers or leading some discussions. So we're still working on that little piece of it, but invite you all to attend. And then the next thing I want to mention is it is the STIP cycle. I think I brought it up at our last meeting that we have actual funds this year. This is the State Transportation Improvement Program, one of our biggest sources of discretionary funding that we get to put towards local streets and roads projects, and also could go towards highway projects. This has been the funding source that has been we've been contributing to the Indianola project that is currently under construction. But this cycle we have about $8.5 million to program. The TAC has been working through that. We did a call for projects. They have brought projects forward. So this next month they will be voting on the final slate of projects and a priority for that, and we'll be forming that into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and that will come to you next month. That will be a time-sensitive vote that we need to take. So we did an early quorum call for next month, and we look like we're good for a quorum, but just if there's some reason you can't make it, please let us know. We want to coordinate with alternates early because it really is essential on that day, because we'll need to get that document off to the state before the following board meeting. So we don't want to wait on that. But the TAC's doing a good job getting through those projects and coming up with recommendations to send to your board. And that is that's all I've got. Just the November board meeting. In addition to the STIP, we will have a presentation from Caltrans on the road charge committee updates. So that will be important. So we'll have kind of a large agenda that evening. So I guess just a heads up to, we'll be in it for the long run. So just be ready in November, and we'll be happy to get through the long agenda.
All right, thank you. Now we come to Caltrans report.
Thank you. An update on the Arcata 101 merge project. That's the one near Gintoli and Arcata. It's currently... Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. How's that? Better? Okay. As you know, it's currently under construction. The crew's been working on constructing a small retaining wall, which is now complete. Remaining work includes constructing fence, reconstructing embankment, and new roadway prism. And once completed in spring, the new lane will be paved and striped. So moving along. Fern Bridge, the pile work is done and the gravel access road will be decommissioned. There will be one overnight closure in the coming weeks to do a seal on the roadway. The notice will be going out 2 weeks in advance, so that'll be going out in about a week or two. Looking at some sort of seismic notification system and safety protocols in the event of another quake. Last chance grade. It's now open to two-way traffic for the first time in approximately 9 years.
Yeah.
A press release went out recently acknowledging the support from everyone who's helped make it happen, including removal of thousands of cubic yards of slide material, installation of wire mesh on the slopes, geotechnical investigations, signal installations, construction of stability enhancing walls, repairs, drainage system, railing installations, roadway realignments, paving, striping, and flagging. Just a whole wide range of activity out there. So future stretches of traffic control will be inevitable, and we're aiming to begin construction on a wall near Wilson Creek in 2027, and we're ready to respond to repair needs as they arise. We'll also be conducting future analysis related to the long-term solution, and the draft environmental document for the long-term last chance grade solution is coming this winter. If all goes according to plan, we could begin construction as early as 2030. And last, I just wanted to put out a reminder that the fiscal year 24-25 call for applications for the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program opened on October 5th. Applications are due in January 18th. There's $53.4 million available for transportation and climate adaptation planning. Thank you.
Well, thank you. A lot of good news in there too. And any PAC member reports?
Thank you. We covered a lot of it earlier. I was going to touch on the Blue Lake service, which was an estimated cost of around $30,000 that was going to be split between the city of Blue Lake and the Blue Lake Rancheria. So that wasn't something that unfortunately we were able to do at no cost, but we were able to do it really quickly as a board to meet that need. So we have 3 stops going, 3 fixed stops going westbound and 2 going eastbound. And some of the main riders of that system on weekdays are high school students, as you mentioned, but also students come all the way from Willow Creek. So not just closer to town. So the intention with those stop timings was really to make sure they can get there on time first and foremost. And my understanding is that we were able to initiate that a little while after our board voted on it, within a week or so. So that is running. And honestly, the timing of it was such that it ended right before a board meeting, and we were able to get it on that agenda and get it done. So it was great to be able to fill that gap. And I don't think it's taking quite that long, but we were conscious of that. There were some community members that felt that it should stop in Glendale to go to the market as well, and some other things, but it's an intercity route, so it's not intra-city, and some of that has to do with funding and operations, and so it needs to make pretty limited stops in between. So Supervisor Madrone is correct that it really needs to have limited stops by the function of it being intercity, but we were able to include those without a substantial delay. The top on, top off system seems to be working really well. And I keep promoting the transit app too. If you download the transit app, it not only will show real-time and routing information for local transit, but it works all over the place and is used really readily all over the country. So if you're traveling, you can use it. And that fare capping is in place. So I forget what the daily fare cap is, but I know the monthly cap is $50. So if people are using their top on, top off, and they don't have a monthly pass, but they're riding enough to reach that fare cap, they will not have to pay more than that. So it's really cool. So I think that is all I have for now. That transit app is not, however, the app that we're using for dispatch of dial-a-ride. It doesn't quite have that functionality. So I'll share an update about that, I think, at a future meeting, because it's there's a lot of stuff still being worked out. But if anyone wants to go with me and ride it just for fun, just to try out a new thing, let me know.
Okay, well, any other board member reports? Well, one thing I was going to bring up, speaking of a transit card that's usable only on transit, I have a Orca card, which is part of Sound Transit, and it works remarkably because you're going to use it on water taxi, ferry, light rail, buses. It's a lot of different things, and they have some kind of capping up there because I first loaded it with $20, and in my head I was running some numbers, and I thought, I need to put more on. So I put some more money on it, and when I got back home, I had $35 still. So
That's Seattle?
it's Sound Transit, so it goes way south and it goes north.
But it's Seattle.
Yeah, that's true. So if you look at something like that, and then up there, they have one bus away is the app that I'm gonna use on my phone up there, and it tells you where the bus is at and how many minutes until it arrives at the stop you're at. And they may have, that may be the one you're using, I don't know, but it works well. And other than that, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Thank you.